does, it forces people to look for new solutions and new ideas. And an example here in orchards, typically an orchard would use herbicide to keep this tree row free of vegetation, to keep the weeds down, to keep the competition out, and to keep the rodents away. So we've tried a number of different things. For example, sweet clover, white clover living match. And in this case, we did get good weed control. We didn't need nitrogen fertilizer. This was a legume that provided the nitrogen for the tree in place. And we actually had water savings from irrigation. That surprised us. Trade-off, the downfall, rodents. The rodents love this stuff and they ate it all up. So as I said, there's no perfect solution that I found yet for many of these problems. But it was one path. There's loads of things and we're continuing our research. But here we've got organic orchards, which have been really a stellar sector in the organic industry. We're the leaders in the country and in the world, probably. Yet I was at the Yakima Orchard last month on a tour, and this is what the orchardist said. That the tour actually visited his farm with the intention of showing that organic agriculture was an important solution for solving farm worker pesticide exposure. How long is this going to go? Not sustainable economically. So we've really got to remember that organic is not immune to that, and we may need to find other avenues to keep the value add. There are a lot of other labels out there trying to figure out how we take some of these sustainability attributes to the market or in terms of regulatory connections, and just some examples. You may have heard of Oregon Country Beef. It's a well-known label out of Oregon. Now actually it's a lot more states than Oregon. Natural beef, for example, the rangeland of the ranches. They have a whole story to tell. They're selling, what is it, Fred? The smell of the sage. Yeah, I mean, it's a fan. Go to their website. It's a wonderful example of sustainability is in the product, but they've packaged it with some really nice other pieces that appeal to many, many consumers. Fair trade, that's a whole, typically right now applies to imports. It's kind of ironic. We can't have fair trade apples from Washington. They'd have to be coming from Chile. Fair trade doesn't apply domestically. I don't know why. But the idea is that it's somehow good worker, treating the workers fairly, and the farmers, the small farmers, are getting a fair shake in the marketplace. But that's not happening here. Salmon Safe, another label trying to look at agricultural practices and how they impact salmon habitat, because many farms have streams that run through them. And then the food lines, which I mentioned briefly. So these are often called eco-labels, trying to take some of these ecological sustainability attributes and push them out in the marketplace and try to get the consumers to vote with their dollars for these changes on the ground. So food labels, in my mind, they can do a number of different things. Some labels have more than one, but typically a label is going to either talk about the product type or quality. So it could be a label, a variety of an apple. It could be a type of label, obviously. It could be the fact that an apple has a guaranteed level of sugar. The apple growers are trying that now. It could be production practices, and we're going to hear about that from the folks coming up next. So organic is clearly an example of an eco-label based around the practices. So is integrated fruit production. So is the absence of growing food with genetically modified organisms. There are labels that specifically link to that. There's other labels that talk more about the impact. So in some cases, the practices can be linked to impact, but in other cases, they're just selling to impact. Dolphin safe tuna. The whole purpose is you're selling a guarantee that the way that tuna has been harvested has protected the dolphins. That's the environmental impact you're trying to guarantee. A lot with origin, the location of the food, certainly that's happening with wine, a lot with cheeses, other things, the whole local movement. And then there's the social impacts, for example, the fair trade. And there's even an effort in the U.S. to develop a family farm label, which I'm not sure where it's at right now. But what I see happening, more and more combinations. As I said, organic alone is not going to carry the day in some markets. People are trying to figure out, do I couple organic with local? Do I couple it with some sort of social farm worker label? And I think that's where we'll see some in the future. Carbon footprint is another one we're starting to see on labels. But at what point does this just get too confusing to the consumer? And at what point is it greenwashing, where the labels don't really mean very much? That's something that needs a little bit watched. The Food Alliance was started here in the Northwest to try to take this idea that we're getting a lot of positive change on the land, but those growers aren't necessarily seeing any reward in the marketplace. And how could we create a mechanism to connect those two? So when we developed the standards, these are what we came up with. We wanted to be able to evaluate the farm in terms of pest management, soil and water conservation, safe and fair working conditions. There's that social element that a lot of these other programs don't have. Wildlife, very explicit part of the puzzle we wanted to have included. And certainly standards around animal production, which are different than crops, but things around animal welfare, their housing, their ability to have their normal social interaction, and certainly drugs and hormones are on the consumer radar screen. And another piece we put in there, because this, in my mind, is really central to sustainability, is this idea of continuous improvement. We don't just cross some line and stop, because sustainability evolves, our knowledge, our technology evolves, and we want these farms to be evolving with it and to be able to demonstrate that. So that's part of the criteria called the food alliance system. The way it's set up is that you get points for these different practices, and you need a certain amount of points. You basically need a passing grade of 75%. And what that allows you to do is recognize that farms are at different places. They may be very strong in a number of areas and have one area where they're weak. But just because of that one weak area, unless it's some of these absolute prohibitives, shouldn't prevent them from making that connection to the marketplace, particularly when they start to develop plans for improvement in those areas that have been identified weak. And this whole process helps farms do that. So as an example, each of the levels is based on the questions, criteria is based on 4 levels. Level 1 being very basic, either the person is doing nothing on that, or they're meeting the basic letter of the law. And as we look up these levels, they're more and more advanced techniques, often requiring more commitment, more cost on the part of the farm to provide that. And typically, level 3 is our 75%. So that's sort of, we want people on average to be there, and ideally, people will be scoring up here as well. That just gives you a quick example. I think the whole standard is online if you're interested. You can go to the food alliance website. I'm probably running late. Okay, I'm getting close. I want to say a little bit about energy, because I think